Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great today. If you want to support the channel and want early access, then check out the Patreon in the description below. And make sure you check out the podcast in the description. Before the story starts, I'd like to share a quick message. And that's, remember, if you're struggling with mental health and you have bad days with it, don't view them as failures and don't be too harsh on yourself. The progress isn't always going to be perfectly linear, and it's okay to have bad days. Just accept it and understand what you can do differently to help in the future. There's no point beating yourself up over it because it's not going to get you anywhere and it's just going to make you feel worse. And you haven't failed if you've had a bad day with it. It's just one of those days and they happen sometimes. Just make sure you keep doing the right things to get better. So I hope you enjoyed these stories and I hope you're all doing great. I'll speak to you all soon. I'm somebody who loves to go camping and into the great outdoors. I had one story that I can't really explain though from a time that me and my cousin went out camping. Now my cousin actually lived a few states away, and where he lives is close to national parks and the trees are just giant there. It's completely different to the ones near where I live, so I always found it as a treat going out with him. So, there's one particular night during the summer that we decided to go camping. I'm actually really excited about this trip because I haven't been out for a while and I wanted this experience to be more special, so I actually took a few days off of work so I could attend. My cousin was much the same and had actually taken time off so we could go out camping together. Now he's a kind of outdoors guy who could just survive out there on his own with nothing but his bare hands. I would say I was relatively similar to this, but not exactly the same. You could have sent me out there with a lot of things and I might still struggle. But anyway, I love to be out there. We're planning on spending 3 days out there in the woods. My friend had actually let me borrow his car too so I could get more equipment there. So I head over to my cousin's and we head out at around 7 or 8 PM. We wanted to make sure there was enough light so we could still get set up and everything and find a good spot. We ended up finding the perfect one close to a lake. We do some fishing there and start a campfire going. It's still daytime and we decide to collect as much wood as possible for this. While we're doing so, I always mention to my brother how beautiful it is outside in the outdoors and how I just feel really peaceful not being at work here. I think it's important too to take breaks from things, and there's no better way than being outside to achieve this. So it begins getting dark and my cousin's telling me stories about some strange things that other members of my family have seen out in the woods. We actually laugh about them because some of the things they say are comical, like UFOs and all kinds. After a while of talking, I have to go to urinate, so I go off to the side to do this quickly. I lean into a tree and do my business. As I then turn back to my cousin, I realise that he's standing there, completely still and silent. I say, "Hey, what's wrong?" but I don't get any reply. I head over to him and I can see he's staring at something. And I meet gazes with whatever this thing is. Across the water, I can just about make out what appears to be a massive slender figure staring at us with very faint glowing eyes. This person or thing is completely still and not making a sound, until suddenly it darts through the trees. It's almost like a big pencil with long stick legs is the only way I can describe it. It moves into the trees slowly and disappears out of sight. Now I don't have to say it to my cousin, he just looks at me and shakes his head and says, "You know what, I think it's time we get off to bed." Now a lot of you are probably wondering why we didn't just go home, but we were tired and presumed that maybe it was something normal. Maybe a tree was falling and our minds were just playing tricks on us. Or maybe it was something to do with the water, I don't know. So eventually we're both trying to fall asleep. I can't for the life of me. I actually have my gun with me, and so does my cousin. We're both trying to play off like we're not scared, but to be honest, we're absolutely terrified. I mean, how could you not be? Whatever that thing is that we both saw, Well, there you go, we both saw it, and it's way bigger than either of us are. Not like we're small either. Anyway, I eventually get so tired of standing on watch that I end up falling asleep until I'm woken by a psst sound and a nudge in my side. It's my cousin, and I know it's serious. I look over and he's pointing his rifle out of the tent. He says, "We've got to move." I say, "What? Why?" He says, "Look." As I look out the tent, I can see 3 or 4 of these things all moving off to the side of the lake. Now the lake's very big, but if you're on the left side where these things are, you can get to us pretty quickly. Whatever these things or people are moving very slowly, almost in sync with each other, far too tall to be normal people. I can't see any glowing eyes, but something about this is just horrifying. We don't know exactly what's happening, but we know it's time to leave and get out of here. We quickly gathered up our stuff. My cousin always pointed the rifle in their direction, just telling me to hurry up. We load everything into the car, hit the ignition, nothing. It's dead. God, I don't believe this crap. Come on, I say as I hit the car. I tried to get it to start for about 2 minutes straight, and my cousin says, "For God's sake, please get on with it." We now realise that we can't actually start the car. My cousin says, "Just follow me and trust me." I realise now that these things are very close. My heart is beating through my eardrums. I can barely make out a word that my cousin's saying to me. I say, "But come on, what about the car?" He says, "There's no time, we have to move." We quickly head off in a direction that I can't really see well. There's some light coming from the lake reflection off the moon, but I can't really see what I'm doing, especially because I was trying to get the car going with a flashlight. We ended up trekking for what was probably 3 or 4 hours. We were actually doing so for so long that the sun's starting to come up now. Not once did we bother trying to look behind us. We knew the pace of these things wasn't very quick, so we could probably escape, but we didn't know how many of these things were actually out there in the woods. Eventually we make it back to civilization, and my cousin actually called one of his friends to come pick us up, and we would head back for the car the following day. Neither of us said anything to his friend because we knew we wouldn't have been believed. We both looked at each other as though we shouldn't tell anyone what had happened, and that there was relief that we should never have felt, the one of being alive. We just went out for a normal camping trip, and my God, we got more than we bargained for. I managed to make it back to my buddy's car the next day and don't really have any problems. Of course I brought my gun with me this time, and my cousin come too. There was no sign of anything being different, but I know what I saw. We both did. These impossibly tall forest creatures that were moving almost silently through the woods, but very slowly and towards us. Whatever these things were clearly intelligent because they were coming towards us from the other side of the lake. I just thank the Lord that I was awoken by my cousin and I didn't just sleep through that to have God knows what happens. I ended up taking the car to my grandpa, who was a mechanic, to check out everything, and he said there was literally nothing wrong with the car. It should have worked fine. Well, that would have been great if it done it on that night. I eventually returned that car to my buddy after going back to the state that I live in. This experience was about 10 years ago, but it put my cousin and I off going out into camping trips in that area completely. My cousin too says that he's never been able to camp alone after this. He believes it could be something Native American, but he's not sure. We're just sure glad as hell that we managed to make it out of there on foot, because if these things were quicker, I truly don't know what would have happened to us. I hate to think of what it could have been. I had recently moved into a wooded area. I was there with my wife and actually enjoyed it a lot at first. However, there were strange things that kept on happening that I just couldn't explain. For instance, there would always be dead animals that would appear on our doorstep. Now, they would literally seemingly come out of nowhere. There would be no sounds or traces of them. I even decided to set up a camera one day to figure out exactly why this was happening, but it never happened since, which is pretty strange. Now, one day I was out walking my dog when my dog bolts off. I think, Jesus, this isn't good. I know if he gets lost out here, I'm not going to find him, and this is completely out of character. I have to go after my dog to try and find exactly where he's ran to. For a while I can't actually hear or see him and end up calling out constantly. I'm desperate and I'm not going to sleep until I find my dog. It's worse because it's getting dark now and I can't really see well. After a while, I decide the best possible thing I can do is establish a perimeter, search around it, then go back for more help. Now when I'm doing this, I feel completely normal, strangely. Almost like I'm in a calm atmosphere. It's strange because it's something I shouldn't be experiencing because I've lost my dog. But I ignore it and just continue with the search. Suddenly I hear a bark. It sounds just like my dog. I quickly rushed over to the sound of it and I realised that there's not many trees or plants around this area, which is good because I should be able to see my dog better. I can see something laying on the ground and I'm so grateful to God that I managed to find my dog. Just as I go up to him, I can hear another bark behind me. I turn around quickly and I can see a pile of animal skulls on the floor. It looks as though they've been there for a long time, almost like they're part of a ritual with the way that they're arranged. I think that's really odd. I quickly turn to grab my dog and run, but the dog's nowhere to be seen. I decide that I've had enough and I sprint back home. When I get home, my wife's confused and says, "Where have you been? The dog come back about an hour ago and I've been desperately trying to figure out where you went." I explained to my wife what happened and she agreed with me that we should never let the dog off the leash again and we should never go to that part of the wooded area. Now when I was younger, I used to be interested in finding naturally occurring radioactive things outside. Now I don't mean anything crazy, just like rocks and stuff. I actually had some old radium watches that would go off on my Geiger counter and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Now the best thing I could find was a very, very, very slightly radioactive rock. I'm not talking uranium or anything, I mean literally just the random naturally occurring ones which would barely be picked up on my Geiger counter, but for me it was pretty cool. Now I was out one day doing this when I realised my Geiger counter wouldn't stop going off. I thought this is a little odd because it doesn't normally do so, and there's radiation so I probably shouldn't be here. It seemed to steadily climb and almost followed me wherever I went. I was convinced that something was wrong with my counter and I just turned it off. Now I wasn't in a military testing area so I didn't really care much. I didn't live near one. I mean honestly, there was nothing to be worried about as far as I was aware. There was no other people or anything around here. So I start my walk home. Now it's becoming dark as I do so, and I see a bright flash ahead of me. Now, I'm not sure what it is. Just as I'm trying to figure out what it is, I realise something's above me. At first I think it's a helicopter until I see the colours of it. There's rainbow colours coming from this circle thing as it slowly comes down towards me, and suddenly a bright light. I woke up an hour later having no idea what had just happened. It took me a few minutes to get my bearings again and figure out what was happening to me. It was very dark now and I sprinted home and got told off by my mum for being out so late. She said, "How long have you been out there and why didn't you put sunscreen on?" I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Look at you." And I could see my arms and the top of my head were very sunburnt, but there wasn't much sun that day. I explained what happened and my mum never believed me. That was until a few days later that some of the neighbours had reported seeing UFO sightings. Now, I don't want people to think I'm crazy. I mean, I've already told you enough about owning a Geiger counter to look for slightly radioactive rocks, but I can't really chalk it up to much else other than maybe a UFO or extraterrestrial encounter. I don't want to be the kind of person to say things like this, but I really don't know what it is. And also the fact that my Geiger counter was going crazy before it happened really confuses me. As I mentioned before, my family has some land in a remote-ish mountain just outside of Eureka. I come down here a few times each year, and haven't ever really experienced anything too out of the ordinary, but last night was different, to say the least. I didn't know this would happen, but apparently the area is pretty popular for UFO sightings. I still don't know if that's what it was, but I'm having a hard time coming up with a logical explanation for this. We had a good fire going for a few hours, and after everybody else went to bed, it was just my dad, my fiance, and I left. We're all just shooting the stuff around the fire, enjoying ourselves and the weather. Around 1 a.m, we're talking about constellations, so we'll lean back to look up at the stars. My fiance pointed out a light which is noticeably brighter than the stars and moving steadily. I immediately try and say, oh, it's a satellite, but my dad says, no, I don't think so. Watch it. Now my dad and I are both hugely into aliens, and we both have a fair amount of sightings in the past. I focus closer on the light and realise it's not gliding across the sky now. It was zigzagging back and forth, moving east. The three of us watched it and explained how weird it is when suddenly it veered in an arc towards the southern mountain. I keep saying to myself, is this really happening? And the light just stops. It just hovers above the mountain for at least 5 minutes. At this point we're all saying it's not a satellite, with the occasional comments about how wild it is. The light started to shift to the right again until it was behind a tree and we lose sight of it. We went back to the normal campfire shenanigans for a couple of minutes, and my fiance decides to get some drinks. As soon as we get up, the entire sky lit up almost painfully brightly with a white flash, like lightning on steroids. There was a crystal clear night, but it shouldn't have been like this. We couldn't even see one little wispy cloud. It could not have been lightning. My dad and I are the only ones who saw it, as most people are asleep now. There wasn't a single sound as it happened. No boom or rumble, but the entire mountain went dead silent for a few minutes afterwards. It was so eerie. It's like time paused momentarily for us. My dad ended up feeling so uncomfortable and anxious that he just went to bed. The two of us stayed up for a while after that, but we don't see any more lights or flashes, but I have a heavy sense of unease for the rest of the night. This is my mother's story. She got out of the car during a long drive through the woods into a clearing. Now on one side is somebody in a tent moving around. Inside the clearing is a pile of passed away deers, maybe 20 in all, and one dog on top. She was so freaked out that she ducks behind a bush only to find a set of women's clothing there. She ran and never looked back again. Now I'd worked in the Scouts for a while, so was used to being outside and used to the kids playing tricks on me. We were attending one particular camp where we were actually a bit further away from where we would normally stay. The guide decided camping would be a good idea, and I was actually really up for it. I remembered how all of the kids kept bugging me about some strange millipede they'd seen that was bigger than a snake under a big rock that I should check out. I just told them to stop playing tricks on me, and I know I'm going to get there and it will be nothing, or they're going to try and make me jump. However, after the 5th request I decide to check it out. I say to my other guide buddy, just wait here, and he laughs at me. I walk over to where the kids are saying about this supposed giant creature, and I laugh because I can't see anything. I say, hey, I can see you behind that tree too, but mid-sentence I stop. I kid you not, I must have seen a 4 feet long millipede stuck onto the back of a tree. It was massive. It must have been about a foot wide. It was almost like a prehistoric one. I quickly screamed at the kids to get out of there, and we all run back to safety. Now, nothing like this should be out there. Nothing like this exists, but I saw it. The kids saw it too, and the other guide looked terrified when I said what we had saw. We decided to quickly cut the trip short and get back to safety, and to this day I still have no idea what I'd seen. Maybe there was a prehistoric creature still alive that we don't know about that survived the meteor or something. I don't know. I'm just glad I didn't see it for too long, and I didn't have to find out another way like it crawling up me. Now, I'm somebody who camped a lot. Where we camp, there's lots of old mining cabins out in the mountains along the Forest Service roads. No one is ever back there except for people riffing through in a jeep. We were camping one time and my kids brought a metal detector with us to see if we can find anything. Buried about 3 foot down, around one of the cabins is a large 1 foot by 1 foot metallic rock. Looking like it's silver, it was very heavy and would go off under the precious metals, so we know it's something. We decide to wrap it up in one of the towels that I have in the truck. We're certain it's something expensive. When we get home I grabbed it and thought that's weird, it seems lighter. I unwrap the towel and find a bunch of broken twigs. My children think I'm messing with them. We go back every year looking for it and have no clue what it is. Maybe it's cursed or something, I don't know. When I was little, we lived on the outskirts of Jackson, Ohio, out in the way middle of nowhere woods. My older brother would sometimes have to take me out when they wanted to go exploring, so my mum could also get some free time. We were going pretty far back one day following a dry creek bed when we come across a deep hole in the middle of the creek, literally a sinkhole. My brothers were joking about me having to go in when we hear a big tree about 1,000 feet off fall. And then another after that. We freaked out assuming Bigfoot was chasing us or an axe murderer. Now the memory of being in the woods has actually stuck with me, kind of like what the hell. So, one time my friends and I were playing in the woods like usual, climbing a steep hillside that led up to a path we often used. At the bottom of the hillside was a rocky creek bed. The climb was anywhere from a 70 to 90 degree angle, and the roots are made of clay, and at a height of 150 feet or more. So, anyway, we're climbing this thing like we usually do, and while nearly at the top, I lose my balance and start falling back, at which point I have a firm hand that helps me back. Once I make it to the top, I go to thank whoever was there, but both of my friends look at me like I'm crazy, saying neither of them actually did anything. It's by far one of the weirdest experiences of my life. So this happened around 2003 or 4, I can't remember. I was at my best friend's house for the weekend with another friend as well. Now my friend lived pretty far downtown from a country road in the woods in East Texas. You had to turn off a farm road and go down a dirt road into the woods for a couple of miles to get to his driveway, also just dirt. Across a small bridge and over a pond to get back there. I'm going in a lot of detail, but you get the point that he lives in the middle of nowhere. Now we've explored the woods around his house before, but never going too far. On this particular day, we decide that we're going to hike into the woods much further now. We walk for a couple of hours and come onto a path clearly made by a four-wheeler and follow it. At the end of the path, there's a clearing that we follow. It goes into the woods and there's a cabin. The cabin was a couple of feet off the ground and supported by blocks and had a wooden front deck. We decided to check it out because we're being silly. The windows are all barred and the door is locked. It gets weirder. The cabin was surrounded by playground equipment. Old playground equipment like from the 30s or 50s. We then walk behind the cabin and the three of us get scared. There were several dirt mounds and shovels around it, almost like graves, but we don't know for sure. We decide at this point that we should leave. It gets weirder though. A few years later, when we're all 16, we come up to a conversation point where we decide we need to go back again. This time bringing my buddy's .22 rifle just in case. We eventually did find the path again and follow it, but this time, when we get closer we can hear people. And everything about the cabin looks the same as before, but there's 4 grown men there with 2 four-wheelers, standing there talking. They clearly can't see us and I'm thankful for that. We're actually a couple of 100 feet away from them and watch for maybe 30 seconds before one of them shouts at us, getting onto the four-wheeler. We ran as fast as we possibly could and ran until we can't hear him anymore. After that we never went back, and my friend moved to a closer town that year. It still gets brought up in conversations and all of us feel sick thinking of it. My family owned lots of swampland, and we had small cabins set up on some of these, because it could be really nice as a getaway sometimes. There's something about being out in nature which is just so relaxing and nice. All of that changed one day, however. When I was about 14, me and my best friend stayed in the cabin. We mostly played video games, and just had a good laugh. One night there was a really big thunderstorm, and we had to retreat from the cabin to get back inside. Now the next morning, my friend looked out the window and said, "Oh, I thought we were staying in the closest one to us." I said, "What are you talking about? We were." He said, "No, we couldn't have been." I looked out the window, and to my amazement, the cabin was no longer there. I then rushed downstairs to tell my dad, wondering what on earth has happened, and my mum meets me halfway up the stairs saying, "You're not going to believe what's happened. The ground that was underneath the cabin you two boys were staying in has collapsed, and the cabin's gone." To this day, it's one thing that's horrified me more than anything. The fact that we were so close to danger and didn't even know it. Heck, nobody knew it. I like primitive camping, and me and my wife go out sometimes by ourselves. We usually bring the dog and spend a couple of nights. This time we invited some friends for drinking. Anyway, on the first day, we heard a vehicle coming down the road. Not odd. There are maybe 10 sites or more several miles down the road. It's a dirt road, with nothing there but these primitive sites. One way in and one way out. What's odd though, is that the vehicle that they see is a meat packing truck. It was old, really old, and the lettering was faded. It was faded in beige. None of us really made out the person driving it. There were no plates on the back either. So we all get creeped out collectively. We kind of decide it's not too weird. Maybe they're just renting it out for the cheap. Flash forward to the morning. My mum calls. She's panicking. Freaking out. Apparently, some hikers were literally abducted within a few miles of us. There are several girls out at our site too. And my mum's convinced it was the people we saw. I wasn't 100% certain, so pull out my GPS. It was less than half a mile from where we were. I I don't remember much of what happened after, but we got the hell out of there.